What's going on, guys? Welcome back to yet another video on the camera flying series. Today we're going to be completing the photography portion of this series with what camera and what lens should I get. So let's get started. So I'm just going to be mentioning a couple of cameras that are pretty common in skydiving, and then if one of them interests you, you can go ahead and search on YouTube or on Google some reviews about it. I'm not going to go into depth on all cameras. I'm just going to list the cameras that are more common on skydiving. Let's get started. So, Canon. What's the best Canon camera for skydiving? Let's see. Canon has the amazing M series of cameras. They are cropped sensor, they are mirrorless, they are compact, they're light, they're super good, and they're almost ideal for skydiving. But they have an issue. None of them have a remote shutter release port, which means you can't connect your blow or your bite or your tongue switch to the camera. Even if you have a digital cable to connect to the digital port on the camera, it's still not going to work because the software doesn't allow it. The only way is if you have a Bluetooth remote switch, which is reliable and does work, but you can't do bursts. You can't just press the button and it keeps firing. You need to be constantly lifting your finger, focusing, half press, and then taking the picture. And having a remote on your hand isn't very ideal for free fall. The exception to this, however, is the Canon M6 Mark II, which has a 2.5mm jack for your remote shutter release. If you love Canon like I do, you can use this camera for stills. And it is an amazing camera. It's got a 32 megapixel IPS-C sized sensor, and I'm sure that paired with a speed booster and some very good Canon glass, you can get amazing shots. Some of Canon's small DSLRs are also great and pretty cheap. The 100D, 200D, and 250D are some pretty good examples of very small cameras and cheap at the same time. Now let's talk about lenses. One of the upsides to Canon is that they have a whole lot of third-party manufacturers making lenses for them. I already talked about lenses for Canon in episode 2, so I'm just going to play the clip here. The Sigma 10mm f2.8 fisheye for crop censored cameras, which is a lens I own. The Canon 20mm f2.8 USM lens, which is also a lens I use, and it's the lens you're seeing right now. The Canon 10 to 22mm f3.5 to 4.5 USM, which is also very good, and one of my favorite lenses. Even though it has a small aperture and only fit crop censored cameras, it still has that USM motor, which means you're going to have super fast focusing, and 10mm is really wide, and you can even get it to 22 if you want to get a little closer in. And you have all of that range in between. The Sigma 10 to 20 f3.5 is also a very good lens because it has kind of a wide aperture. It's zoom, and it's designed for crop censored cameras. But that wide aperture and that zoom ability is going to be, you're going to be able to get that super wide 10mm or 60mm on crop sensors, and you can still get into that 20mm on crop sensor, which is 32 on full frame, while being at a fixed aperture of 3.5. Now, if you want to go super wide, Sigma makes an 8 to 16mm f4.5 to 5.6 for crop censored cameras. This is as wide as you can get on cropped sensors without going fisheye. Sigma also makes a 4.5mm circular fisheye lens for cropped sensors. It's an f2.8, which means it lets in a lot of light, and it's a circular fisheye, which means you're going to be able to see as much of the image as possible, but distortion is going to be pretty big, so I don't really like that lens. Again, we have to keep in mind that most of these lenses are designed for cropped censored cameras, which means to get their full frame equivalent, you're going to have to multiply the focal length by 1.6 if you're on a Canon cropped censored camera, or 1.5 if you're on Nikon crop censored cameras. And I would recommend, if you do see a third-party lens that I didn't mention that you think is going to work for you, just look online for how the autofocus motor works and if it's a sharp lens, if it's good. Pretty much all the aspects of a lens can be mentioned on the detail, like the aperture, the focal length, the zoom range, but the autofocus motor and how well it focuses is something that you really need to see some reviews and some videos to know about it. Okay, so just make sure you do research before you actually purchase a lens. Now let's talk about Sony. Sony is by far the manufacturer with the most options available for skydiving. Let's start with the cameras. Sony has a plethora of cameras that are good for skydiving. There are 4 important lineups of stills mirrorless cameras, which are the Alpha 5000 series, the Alpha 6000 series, the Alpha 7 series, and the Alpha 9 series. The A5000 series is the cheapest line of the bunch and includes the A5000 original and the A5100, which is the second generation. They are all small, cheap, and light, and both have good performance. So if you are interested in an entry-level cheap camera, have a look into those and just invest some good lenses. And then once you're ready to progress onto a better body, you can keep your very good glass that you bought when you bought your cheaper body. The A6000 series is the best you can get in terms of cropped sensor. They are very good and are even equipped with some professional level features. This lineup includes the A6000 original, the A6100, the A6300, the A6400, the A6500, and the A6600. All these numbers are very confusing, but they increase in size and increase in quality and features. To know which one is the best for you, go online and look for a comparison. There's a lot to choose from, and there's one camera to fit everybody's budget. The A7 series is part of their professional full frame lineup. This includes the A7 Original, the A7R, the A7S, the A7 II, the A7R2, the A7S2, the A7 III, the A7R3, and the A7R4, which is a more recent camera. Each have their own special features and benefits, and the lower the number of the camera basically means the older it is and the less features it have, but also the cheaper it will be. And if the camera has an R, it basically means it's a high megapixel version, and if it has an S, it's usually a lower megapixel version dedicated to have more and better light sensitivity. If it doesn't have an R or an S, it's usually a middle ground. Not too many megapixels, not too little megapixels. And also usually the cheapest. I think getting the Rs isn't too important because the Rs have a huge number of megapixels. Just getting the A7 III, for instance, or the A7 IIS or the A7 II is probably going to be more than enough for a skydiving looking for a full frame camera. But if you're looking for that ultra high resolution camera to do huge prints, the A7R4 and the A7R3 are the way to go. Finally, the A9 series. This is Sony's professional sports lineup of cameras. This includes the A9 Original and the A9 II. These cameras don't have super high megapixel counts, but they can shoot 12 frames per second mechanical and 20 frames per second in compressed RAW, which is super good. But for skydiving isn't really necessary. I don't recommend this lineup since it's way too expensive, and for that money you can just get an A7 III or an A7 II and some very good lenses. Let's talk lenses for Sony. Sony has some great lenses going on. You got your G Masters and you got your Carl Zeiss glass. They have the E mount, and if it's an FE, it's for full frame. If it's just an E, it's for cropped sensors. Pretty much all G Master lenses are great, super sharp, but really expensive. They're like the Canon L series of lenses. For cropped sensors Sony cameras, I really like the Sony E10 to 18mm f4 OSS. It has image stabilization, a nice fast aperture of f4. Also, on the 1.5 crop, 10mm comes out to be 15mm equivalent on full frame, which is super wide. The Sony E20mm f2.8 is also great, but it is a little bit of a tighter shot. But it's also good to have that super fast aperture of 2.8. And paired with a good sight, you can get some very cool pictures. Sigma also makes some amazing art lenses for full frame cameras and some very good contemporary lenses for cropped sensors. Whatever you choose, I still recommend you guys check out comparisons between the cameras and lenses you choose and see which ones fit your budget and needs the best. With that being said, I hope you guys liked this last episode of the photography portion of the camera series. We will now pass on to videography on the next episode, so stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or complimentary information you would like to add, you can do so freely in the comment section down below. And as always, have a great day.